I was grateful. Do we think we need it? I was grateful that our children don't have to share their bat mitzvah day with other children. I was grateful that our cantor is a joy to sing along with. As we walked into the social hall to enjoy a kiddush lunch after the service, I had a flashback from 25 years before, a fateful evening in that very same social hall. Jeff and I were early in our relationship, and I was a starry-eyed young woman imagining a life full of Jewish practice after 18 months in Israel. Jeff was cynical about Jewish engagement after years of non-participation and a Jewish childhood in Wichita, Kansas. There were many tears, a joint trip to Israel. We agreed that we would try to forge a Jewish life together in Chicago. We decided to synagogue shop to see if we could find a good fit. One evening, the aforementioned congregation was having a young adult Shabbat dinner. We went, ready to find our Jewish home. As we approached a table in the social hall, the first person we spoke to reached out their hands and said, "These seats are taken." This happened a few times more as we moved around the room, never meeting anyone except the people who were telling us that there wasn't room at their table. We gave up and went home. A few weeks later, we accompanied my parents to Rotfeit Tzedek for a Shabbat service. We were happy to join my parents. We'd been married here at Rotfeit Tzedek, but we didn't see this as a viable part of our shopping experience. But as we walked into the atrium, people fell over themselves to welcome us. We were the youngest people at the service, perhaps by a generation. Everyone made room for us. People introduced themselves, handed us prayer books, moved over in their seats. And if my memory serves correctly, Bob Channon took a moment to talk with Jeff about Jeff's beloved Kansas Jayhawks. In the weeks and months to come, we continued to contrast the two nights in our mind. Sure, one congregation was big and overflowing with young adults, so many that there weren't seats available. The other was small and flowing with people who had been young adults many decades before. One felt like a place where one could be a participant, one who attends busy events. Rotfei felt like a place we could be creators. Creators of programs, creators of community, creators of ideas and conversation, and a place where we could create a Jewish world for ourselves. Now, let's not pretend that it's been only a smooth road. We watched friends leave each year, the risk of being part of an academic community. We sometimes sat on the floor at Tat Shabbat with just us and baby Hannah and Andrew and Yael, wondering where we could find more young families. We sat in board meetings with folks who had lifetime terms and were resistant to change. We saw archaic conservative movement practices still in place that we needed to push against. We faced a challenge of creating a Jewish educational program that met the growing community's needs. Let's go back to the Friends Bat Mitzvah and the social hall. As our family watched our youngest Avi inhale a plate of lox, I turned to the children and said, "You know, we thought about joining this synagogue. We didn't because people weren't nice, but perhaps had that night been different, we would have." Max, our quiet, deep thinker, sat and contemplated that information. And then he said, "If you had, our life would have been totally different. Our friends would have been different. Our education would have been different." His voice got louder. Everything would have been different. It wouldn't have been the life we have now. Well, in retrospect, this seems abundantly obvious. The moment he said it, I almost wept with the shock of the realization. 25 years ago, we had hoped that we would find a home for our Jewish life, and it didn't feel real until our teenager could articulate it for us. Indeed, had we chosen a different synagogue, we wouldn't have reconnected with Erica and Tammy, raising a third generation of Rotfei kids together. We wouldn't have reconnected with Sarah and Stephen, who have become role models for us in marriage and Jewish leadership. We wouldn't have spent hours upon hours sitting on the colorful carpet singing the dinosaur knocking on my door song with Yael and Andrew and Linda and Russ and Meg and Brian and Ethan and Rebecca. The list could go on and on. We wouldn't have had the joy of watching our youngest child prepare for their bat mitzvah with David and Rachel. I wouldn't have had a day on the deck with Rebecca where the Jewish Enrichment Center took shape. And I wouldn't have gotten to share reading lists in the atrium with Alyssa and have coffee on Sundays with Beth and Dan. I could stand here and do this for hours, pointing to everyone in this room and talking about a connection Jeff and I have had with each of you. And more importantly, our children know that this is a place they can return to, where people will love them, look out for them, support them, people that they can call if they need a favor, people who will feed them, hug them, and celebrate them. Before I finish, I want to take a moment to speak to the younger folks in the room. I realize that Jeff and I are now a generation older than you, and perhaps we look to you as the folks did to us when we first arrived. Old. Here is my message to you. Make this place the home you want it to be. Start a play group. Have folks over for Shabbat. Take a walk with someone you connected with at Kiddush lunch. Start a carpool with other Enrichment Center families. Sing with Rachel. Study with David. Play basketball with the dads. Communities are not for passive consumption. They are for creating. And each generation needs to create what they want and what they need. Don't wait for someone else to create the change or organize the thing or extend the invitation. Do it, and then understand the power of what you did. Perhaps it will take you a generation to see the impact of your doing, or perhaps you'll simply enjoy Shabbat dinner next week at a new friend's house. And most importantly, when someone new walks in the door of this building, reach out a hand and welcome them in, and pull up an extra chair at the table. You never know how you might change the trajectory of their life.
I think I'm up here as the Maf Tirolea. You know, or for the baseball fans, of which there are many, I'm the cleanup pitcher or batter, cleanup batter. So anyway, whatever. Rabbi Minkus suggested that we talk about what we wish for Rodfei Tzedek in the years ahead, that we reflect on our own experiences and then cast them into the future. So my portion tonight recounts the pivotal moments for me, both personal and communal, that place me on not quite the bima this evening, but here. A little history. My adult relationship with Rodfei began around 1978, almost 50 years ago. Stephen and I had moved back to Chicago from Iowa City. We had a 2-year-old son, Nathaniel, and I decided it was time to join a synagogue. We joined Rodfei, which I remembered from my youth as progressive and filled with light. Surprise. Here we were in the late 1970s, but shul felt as if it were 1950s. 20 years and nothing had changed, except that there were very few members between the ages of 35 and 60. After a few years, I was asked to sit on the board. After a few meetings, when I asked a question about the Hebrew school, it was quickly made clear to me that no one was interested in what I, whose child was actually in the Hebrew school, wished to discuss. For me, Rodfei felt like Leviticus. A lot of rules, but little to elevate the spirit. By the late 80s, I had one foot out the door, ready to find another synagogue or no synagogue. But then Rabbi Gertel came to Rudfay, bringing with him major changes. Most important to me, Rudfay became egalitarian. And to enable this change, the cantor taught a Torah trope class, which several of us attended, enabling us to participate more fully in services. And our new chazan was a woman. But the building was collapsing. And the officers, all of us between the ages of 40 and 45, had major decisions about how to survive. Never was this more evident than at the funeral of Nell Pekarsky, a smart, funny, wise, beloved member of the congregation. It was January of 1998, a frigid winter. Nell's funeral was held in the main sanctuary, but the boilers went out, all 5 of them. The indoor temperature was about 40 degrees, unfit for anything, but particularly unfit for a funeral with mourners from around the city, because everyone in the fundraising world knew Nell. And they were furious about this kind of send-off for someone they loved. Something had to change. Rob Shapiro, who was VP of House at the time, reminded me that the entire building was held together with paper clips and chewing gum. Luckily for us, but not for the Pekarskys, a new building was in the offing. We moved into a new building. We took a deep breath, adjusting to new space, the partnership with the JCC. Our building was young and fresh, but we were mostly middle-aged. Then around 2005, Sarah Abella approached Ed and me for some money to support a small group of families with little children who gathered every Friday night to light candles and eat pizza. We agreed to seed this program with $300 and told Sarah to come back when they needed more. That small amount of money seeded a burgeoning group of young families, and some of those children are now in college. A few years later, Sarah started a Sunday morning program for toddlers, and then another new member, Rebecca Milder, began to work with Sarah while developing a whole new approach to Jewish education. And we had more young families, some of them new to the city, some simply attracted to Hyde Park, some who had been raised at Rudfay. This Hevra, this holy community, became younger. The tectonic plates began to shift. We deliberately opened the board to younger members. We appointed younger members as officers, notably Beth Niestat, Sarah Abella, Yael Hoffman, and Andrea Frazier. We created an ad hoc governance committee to change the bylaws. It met for a full year over dinner at my house. As a result, we instituted term limits. We pared down the size of the board. We eliminated mention of all committees in the bylaws, save the nominating committee. Then we met for another 2 years around the Delsey's dining room table, debating change and a new mission statement. The mission statement that we wrote was rejected by the board, but its intent remained present. The words were in our heads, if not on the website. The seeds of change were sown. We began to weed out board members who only knew how to say no. Another ad hoc committee met, and we changed to a voluntary dues structure. And we hired carefully and oh so well. Rabbi Minkus has helped make us a community. He has opened us to each other through this American Shabbat, by pairing us for Shabbat dinners in our homes, by changing dry, high holiday readings for revelatory personal storytelling, by reliving our bar mitzvahs at Rebar. He greets us at the door on Shabbat, not from the bima. He has taught us to find our Judaism in ourselves and in each other. He has taught us that community happens not just in the sanctuary or the classroom, but around the Kiddush lunch table, around the potluck Shabbat dinner table at Shabbat al fresco. On any given Shabbat, I am sure CRZ comes in first as the shul with the highest rate of calories consumed per congregant. And then there's Cantor Rosenberg. Literally and figuratively, she has given us our voices. She has given us new works and new melodies with which to rejoice. She has made our tefillot and our gatherings like Kabbalat Shabbat. She has opened the bima to us, sharing with us her music and her joy. When we sing together at Naaseh V'Nishma, my spirit soars. And behind the scenes, she coaxes the best out of every bar mitzvah teen. And then there are the aha moments that turn our heads and our hearts 180 degrees. Some are communal and some are personal. One such moment came to me in a class that Dan Liebenson was teaching on the leadership failures that jump out of us in the story of the scouts who are sent to spy out the land to determine if the Israelites can claim it. They return after their sortie, bringing with them evidence of great bounty, but fearsome inhabitants. In a very hasty decision, the elders decide not to enter the land. The story itself would have been enough to chew on for the next few classes. But as we were studying the story, Dan casually said that the story is one of the important myths we tell ourselves. Myths, I said to myself. My head spun around. A myth. And in an instant, Torah stopped being a collection of unfathomable stories, but rather a collection of wonderful teaching myths. Another aha moment came for me in a class of Rabbi Minkus's. Somehow the class devolved into everyone going around the table saying, I believe in God. When my turn came, I said, I believe in being Jewish. The aha was that I could declare wholeheartedly what I did believe in, not what I was supposed to believe in. Finally, the communal aha that comes when a member of this community tells a personal story from the bima, revealing some essential part of his or her soul. And we are stunned that we have been honored with the telling, with the new understanding of who this person is. But back to the communal. I find great joy in being part of a healthy and functioning community. But communities, like families, like friendships, require thought and care. For the Rodfei Chevra, my hope is that over the next 15 years, you look at every element of our lives together. Our clergy, our board, our building, our music, our prayers. Take it apart, rethink it, tweak it, turn it around 180 degrees, throw it out, or just put some lipstick on it. because lo bashamayim he. It is not in the heavens, for it is very close to you in your mouth and in your heart, so you may do it. Thank you.
I'll be brief. Those are tough acts to follow, and I'm a bit verklempt. But I want to thank Ben, Sarah, and Sarah. You guys were wonderful. Yeah, you can clap. Sometimes when we have speakers, I don't want you to say how easy it is to pick the people, but it could have been any one of you. So I want to thank for each of you for hitting it out of the park. That's a sports reference we can all easily accessible. So this week I read an article on E-Jewish Philanthropy, which is kind of like a trade publication for Judaism. And there was a story where EJP actually sent a reporter, which I didn't think they had, to cover Har Zion's anniversary. Har Zion, read the book The New Rabbi, if you want to know about it. But it's a synagogue that I think Sarah was describing. It just happens to be in Philadelphia. It's a large synagogue, or at one point it was large, and I think it was its 75th or 100th anniversary, and I was thinking, it's not that noteworthy. And then I was thinking about how anniversaries seem to be all around. I've read at least 2 articles in The New Yorker about Saturday Night Live's 50th anniversary. Among many other public displays, self-referential and self-important acknowledgments of that mark. Here's another sports reference. For a show that has a batting average of funny sketches below 300, felt a bit much. And then there's The New Yorker's 100th anniversary, which I've seen a lot of coverage of, both in the magazine and beyond. And that points to a lot of things. But one is that there's a dearth of institutions who can sustain their mission and relevance over an extended period of time beyond the generation of founders and their offspring. It seems to me with those institutions, among others, that they're being celebrated simply for still being here. And all the while, it made me think about us. When our anniversary, an acknowledgement of it, feels quite muted. 150 years is so much more. I cannot impress upon us enough how remarkable 150 years is. We almost precede the fire. We precede the creation of any denomination of Jewish life in America. We precede women's vote, planes, automobiles, the faintest idea of a Jewish state and a political ideology or path towards achieving that. Orville Wright was 3 years old, and his brother Wilbur was not yet born in 1874. Road Faith Tzedek was already in its 3rd building when Richard Daley was born. But perhaps more noteworthy are the names of the synagogues that opened and closed in that time. Places forgotten to history, communities that moved, were shuttered, or outright abandoned, going from robust to empty in only a few years. It's possible we have their memory absorbed into our yahrzeit list, but that's it. We have surprisingly little in terms of mementos, artifacts, tchotchkes, ritual objects, and sidorim from the past. What we have found, we arranged in the gift shop. We have a tzedakah box upstairs in the chapel from the Sachs family that is over 100 years old. But many other synagogues have much deeper reservoirs of physical memories. We don't have them. I think that is because even though there have been many quite different iterations of Road Faith Tzedek in these 150 years, Each of those generations that Ben talked about knew the danger of holding too tightly to stuff, yanking too hard on the cords of memory. There's not enough slack for the future. At Hamburg, I don't know where he is, but there we go. Hey, Ed. President, several times over, was the CFO at his company for over 20 years. And when asked how he was at the same place for so long, he said, I wasn't. It was many different companies in those years. This is true of our history and of us today. Synagogues that do not change, that do not adapt, they close. Synagogues must be immersed and connected to the times that they're living in while meaningfully set apart from them. They must recognize that a synagogue requires a fealty to the tradition, an understanding of its sanctity, and that what makes it sacred and what has always made it sacred are its people, you. CRZ has done this. This is an exceptional and extraordinary task of maintaining relevance and giving life to itself over and over again. There have been many buildings, denominational changes. We changed the way we sit, the way we organize, the way we sing, the books we used. There have been presidents and rabbis, but what has not changed is our grounding force. Our foundation is each other. Rodfeit Tzedek is a community, a treasure of interconnected stories and actualizing the dreams of our ancestors in the Torah, while exceeding the dreams of the ones who came here and settled in a storefront in Canaryville. And we should be so proud that we are not only here, but thriving. And it's on the backs of each of you that we have a community that has stood the test of time, and yet a community that is built to continue to do that again. So I ask you, if you have a glass, to raise it. L'chaim. I think that's it. I think you can head out to the atrium or the social. There's food. There's also the Chai film that's showing up in the chapel if you want a little dose of history. So thank you all and enjoy yourselves.